Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, any and all, to this year's Halloween special. It's that time of the year where leaves blow in the wind and horror prevails. It's one of my absolute favorite occasions of the year, and I hope each and every one of you watching will have a spectacular evening. This video is a collection of some of the best creepypastas I've read in 2017. Keep in mind that the stories I'm about to talk about were not all written in 2017, I just simply read them over the course of this year. I'll leave a link down to each and every story down in the description so you can read them for yourself. Some of the shorter stories on the list I will read in their entirety, while I will summarize the longer ones. With some of the stories I may also cut them short or leave them on cliffhangers, because I feel the stories really do deserve that you read them on your own. Some of them just cannot be summarized while still be given justice. That makes sense, right? I would still highly recommend reading each and every one of them for yourself. It's much more special that way, isn't it? Happy Halloween, everybody! Here's my Halloween costume in case you were wondering. Have a good one. Number 10. Hollowers. They are everywhere. Sometimes they just choose to let you see them. He crawled into the hospital on his hands and knees that day, soaked in his own blood. His wild eyes darting quickly from left to right. He reached out for people, grasping at thin air like a madman. It was a quiet night, and he quickly caught the attention of the doctors. His mutilated body was so distorted people didn't dare look at him. Two men grabbed his arms and legs and hurled him onto a stretcher. Then, it stopped. The man was still. He just stared at the ceiling silently. All of a sudden, he jolted up, shaking violently. He grasped a doctor's hand and began muttering gibberish. Co-workers stood in absolute shock. With some ungodly strength, he crushed the doctor's hand. His bones could be heard snapping. Finally, he fell back onto the stretcher still once more. And as abruptly as it had started, it stopped. With his last breath, he whispered, "They are everywhere. Sometimes they just choose to let you see them." Hollowers. To this day, no one knows what happened to that poor man, but it has never happened since. Number 9. Doors. This story begins by the author telling us that they're adopted and never knew their real parents. However, the adoptive family they grew up with couldn't be better. There was the mother, Janice, a kind woman who would show nothing but love for the author, and who would sometimes tickle their back with her nails when they were watching TV together. There was Richard, the father, who was more of a stern and violent fellow, who never quite accepted the author as his own child. He would often spank his children to keep them in line. Finally, there was Emily, the sister, who got along very well with her adoptive sibling. They would always stay up late and talk about anything. Well, she did most of the talking, the author mostly just listened. Due to a shortage of bedrooms in the house, the author had a pallet set up next to Emily's bed on the floor, where they slept. Life couldn't be better, until that one horrible Wednesday night. As Emily came home from her church's youth group gathering, she went over to the author and hugged them. The two siblings went to the living room and spent the evening by the TV watching several programs about animals and nature, their favorite subjects. By the time night came, a growing sense of uneasiness filled the author, as if something wasn't quite right. As soon as the two went to bed, something moved outside the window which put the author on high alert. Something was definitely wrong. Suddenly, late in the night, a loud crash was heard on the other side of the house. In an instant, the author darted up and barked at Emily to wake up, and as soon as she did, they ran to the parents' room. Dad was dead. His neck was splayed open and gaping with blood spilling onto the floor. The master bathroom's door was locked, and standing by it was a man. A large, rugged man. He turned around and saw the author, and showcased a face so horrifying it would never be forgotten. His eyes, large and filled with lust, his beard uneven and bloody, with a set of yellow crooked teeth, he smiled at the author, before completely ignoring them and entering the bathroom where Janice was hiding. He raised the large razor he was carrying and sliced her open, tearing her to shreds. As he did, Emily screamed and the man looked up and stared at her before quickly giving chase. Emily turned and ran as the author froze, but for some reason the man completely bypassed them and went straight for the young girl, and the author followed suit. Instead of killing the girl, the man simply grabbed her by the arm and dragged her through the house. The author made as much noise as possible, hoping someone would come to their aid. The man couldn't take her, not her. The author mustered one final word to the man. Why? The man simply responded by putting a hand on the author's head and saying, "Good boy." He smiled and dragged Emily outside before slamming the door shut behind him. The author was at a loss for what to do. The man was out there, with her, doing who knows what to her, and the author was completely helpless. They simply sat down, staring at the front door, before glancing down at their paws. If only they could open doors. Number 8. The Girl in the Picture. You know, sometimes I like to shed light on certain stories that may not be in the spotlight, which I personally believe deserve more attention and appreciation. This story here is one of them. At the time I'm recording this, it only has 3 comments on the wiki, one of them from me. Hopefully some more people will be able to appreciate this very solid story after you hear about it here. For some time, this image has floated around on the internet. A simple black and white picture of a young girl in the woods, which caused many headlines and a lot of speculation earlier this year. Who was the girl? What was she doing? Was she a ghost or a spirit or just a normal girl? The author of this story claims she knows who the girl is. It was a face she had not seen in many years. The author, whose name is Rebecca, grew up in Coila, a small town in Cambridge, New York. She used to have a best friend whose name was Zoe. You could probably say that Zoe was the author's first love, but she was too young to even see it that way at the time. Rebecca was 12 years old on the last day she ever saw her friend. In her youth, there was a popular ghost story going around town about a supposedly local cult that would take children and perform horrible acts on them, before killing them and using their blood for God knows what. One day in school, Ricky Davis, one of Rebecca's and Zoe's friends, came up to the two and told them that they had found the house of the supposed cult that was terrorizing the town. Ricky was convinced and dared the 2 girls to check the house out for themselves. Rebecca had her doubts, but Zoe jumped at the opportunity to prove her bravery. She never did buy the stories about the cult, and after some deliberation, and realizing she didn't want Zoe to go into the woods together alone with Ricky, Rebecca decided that Zoe and her were going to find the house themselves. The next day, the 2 went into the woods and followed the directions that Ricky had given them. Lo and behold, they found the house he had described. Seemingly abandoned and old, it piqued the interest of Zoe and the dismay of Rebecca. Rebecca decided to put her foot down and tell Zoe that she did not want to enter the house, and Zoe complied out of respect for her friend. Just as the 2 were about to leave, a large burly man approached the house with an axe, and the 2 froze. The man stopped, observed the girls, and then dropped the axe to the ground, explaining that he was simply collecting wood. The girls explained just why they were there, and the man understood. All seemed well and good, and the 2 were about to leave, when the man asked if the 2 wanted a ride home. They politely refused. "That's okay, we know the way," Rebecca told the man. "I'm sure you do. Just tell me one thing," the man said. "Are you both virgins?" The 2 girls were shocked. "Virgins," he repeated with a faint smile on his face. "Have you fucked anyone?" Rebecca turned away from the man to face Zoe, and before she could say anything, she felt a sharp pain on the back of her head as the world faded to black. And that's where I'll leave the story for now. Please, go into the description and read the entire story for the full effect. I'm sorry, but I cannot summarize this story without leaving out so much of the personality, vivid storytelling, and wonderful characterization the story portrays. I'm afraid it cannot properly be given justice when it's simply summarized. Trust me, this story is fairly lengthy, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I was very glad I read it. I think you will be too. So please, don't hate me for cutting it short. I hope you understand. I also have to get this video out before Halloween, so let's move on to the next story. Number 7. Pale Luna. Pale Luna details the urban legend of an old, mysterious, and ambiguous text-based video game that was never once circulated outside of the San Francisco Bay Area. This game, with its uncertain origins, flew under the radar of most people during the 80s. Those who did acquire copies of the game while it still existed were greeted with an experience unlike any other. Many people wrote off the game as being cryptic, annoying, and just downright awfully programmed, as any choices in the game that did not specifically align with what the game wanted would result in the game crashing and a need to reboot the player's computer. As you can imagine, most players grew sick of the game quite quickly, and happily disregarded it as nothing more than a terrible, buggy affair. However, one man by the name of Michael Nevins, who had way too much time on his hands, decided to sit down and finally figure out if there was anything else buried deep within Pale Luna. After hours and hours of trial and error, Michael experienced all the game had to offer, which was the following. You are in a dark room. Moonlight shines through the window. There is gold in the corner, along with a shovel and a rope. There is a door to the east. Command: pick up gold, pick up shovel, pick up rope, open door, go east. Reap your reward. Pale Luna smiles at you. You're in a forest. There are paths to the north, west, and east. Command: go north. Use gold. Not here. Use shovel. Not now. Use rope. You've already used this. After this screen, Michael had to try each and every option to see if the game would display different text. After hours of trying, he finally had results. Pale Luna smiles wide. There are no paths. Pale Luna smiles wide. The ground is soft. Pale Luna smiles wide. Here. Command: dig hole, drop gold, fill hole. Congratulations. After this screen was reached, no other commands were accepted, effectively ending the game. The numbers at the end were coordinates that led to a forest near Lassen Volcanic Park. Michael vowed to see this game through to the end, and so decided to make his way to the exact place where the coordinates pointed him to. He grabbed a map, a compass, and a shovel, and set off. And to his amusement, the directions he went in to get to said place corresponded with the directions taken in the game itself, and once he finally reached the exact spot where the coordinates led, he found a patch of uneven dirt. Excitedly, he decided to start digging, hoping to find Pale Luna's buried treasure, but what he found was the badly decomposing head of a blonde-haired little girl. Horrified, the man reported his findings to the police, and the girl was identified as Karen Paulson, 11 years of age, who had gone missing a year and a half prior. Due to the anonymous identity of the programmer of Pale Luna, the person responsible for the game was never caught. Collectors have been known to offer high amounts of money for an authentic copy of the game. The rest of Karen's body was never found. Number 6. Hanging Man Hill. This tale takes place in Gustone, South Carolina, a sleepy, lonely little town just south of Columbia. This is where our main character moved together with his mother when she lost her job. He, of course, wasn't very happy about this, as he was convinced the only friends he would be making were fire ants and the hot sun. However, he soon befriended a young kid by the name of Terry. Now, Terry was very interested in scary movies, much to the dismay of our protagonist, who was a massive chicken. He, of course, hated watching all of the horror movies Terry threw at him, and when Terry realized this, he turned to urban legends. One certain legend caught the interest of our author: Hanging Man Hill. One day, when the two friends were biking around town, Terry took the author to a certain area where a series of sandy, dry hills and long stretches of telephone poles were placed. This was where a man by the name of Roy Terrence had hung himself after his wife and child left him. He had done this by using the telephone wires just above the two. The police only found the charred husk of what used to be a man, and according to legend, if one were to be in the same area at the exact same time of the man's death, they too would be strung up on the same wires. Of course, Terry wanted to stay and see what would happen, and contrary to Terry's usual joking self when detailing urban legends, this time he was dead serious. According to him, his grandpa had lost his life to Roy Terrence, hence why his grandmother was in a perpetual state of anger and bitterness. The next evening, the two met up near a creek, where they set up a small fire and roasted some marshmallows, before making their way over to the telephone poles and waiting for something to happen. Late in the night, when the author was just about to fall asleep, something did. A loud, crusty, peeling sound echoed out, and as soon as it was heard, Terry took his bike and bolted up the hill, and so did the author. On the wires was Roy Terrence. A sagging shape, with flesh as dark as the night, clung to his bones for dear life. His facial features seemed to be in a constant state of agony and ecstatic joy, and only one eye remained in its socket, gazing upon the main character with immense hatred. Just as soon as it appeared as though he was ready to climb down and come get the two, his spine snapped, as what was left of his body fell into the fire previously set up by the boys, and as his body turned to ash, he gave one glowing, burning, satisfied grin. Then, the author realized that Terry was nowhere to be found. Following his bike tracks, they came upon a startling sight. There, up on one of the telephone wires, was the body of Terry, charred and burnt, with his eyes bulged from his head in shock. Endless wires were entangled on his neck, and in his arm was one last bag of marshmallows, melted to his hand from the heat. The police investigation was short. They found nothing. No evidence that anyone had ever been in the area or on the telephone wires. A search was commissioned for Terry, who was never found. Days after the investigation was dropped, Terry's grandmother passed away. She hadn't said anything to anyone at all, and only sat and stared at the picture of her and her husband for the remainder of her life. Years later, the author returned to Gaston to visit his family for a while, and decided to stop by his old neighborhood. When he found himself back by the hills and the telephone poles, he stayed there for a while, pondering the events that transpired all those years ago. And that was when he caught something in the corner of his eye. Something that he only saw for a tiny bit before it fluttered away. It was a melted marshmallow bag. Number 5. Anansi's Goatman story. Yes, I am finally covering this story. You guys have been suggesting it to me for years, and I finally decided to read it for myself just recently. I completely understand why. Let's find out. What's unique about this story is that it's written very informally, as it originates from 4chan's X-board. It retells the story of the author's very peculiar experience while camping in the woods a couple of years ago, together with his cousins and a couple of other friends. When he and some of his cousins reached the camp they would be staying at, it was obvious that something was weird. The air had a somewhat electric smell like ozone. This smell would come back periodically and could only be described as coppery and metallic. Now, everyone was legitimately freaked out by this, but this was only the beginning of the nightmare that was about to unfold. Stories started to pop up among the cousins and friends about how they had seen a man standing in the forest ahead of their path. He had been facing away from them, and once they began distancing themselves from the man, the putrid smell came back. Extremely strange things began to occur not long after this. One of the author's cousins began going on about an urban legend about something known as the Goatman, who he thought was after them. Soon enough, the smell went away, and nothing more happened that night. The next night, at around 1 p.m., the smell came back much stronger than before. Everyone was horrified and stayed in their camper, refusing to go outside. They ended up cooking brats, 12 of them, one for each person. One of the author's cousins got angry because there weren't enough brats for everyone, apparently, despite there being one for each person. That's when everyone came to a chilling conclusion. There were only 11 people left. There had been 12 people in the cabin previously. Since everyone didn't really know each other very well, no one had noticed that there had been an extra person with them who no one really paid attention to or interacted with. This person was now nowhere to be found. Now, it's a little difficult to describe every single detail of what happens next in the story, as the informal writing style can be a little bit confusing and long-winded at times, so consider it a blessing but also a curse. I'll skim through a little bit of it and get to some of the more important parts. Again, the full story is in the description just in case. After many more frightening and bizarre occurrences, the night comes to a head when at around 11 o'clock, when everyone is huddled together and hiding in the cabin, the stinking smell of copper turns much, much worse into a nasty blood-like smell. There is what appears to be someone or something at the door, half knocking and half clawing at it. There was a voice so incredibly inhuman and unnatural that it was hard to describe. It didn't have any semblance of cadence or rhythm, and a strange tone to it. It kept repeating the words, "Let me the fuck in. Stop fucking playing. And in. Let me the fuck in." For almost 15 minutes. Then, the smell goes away for a while, and for the next hour or so, the creature creeped around the woods, occasionally coming back to the door to say something. One of the people in the cabin finally had had enough, and opened the door and headed out with a rifle. He fired a few shots, and what sounded like slow gibber and hooting could be heard from somewhere in the woods. Then, it began screaming, which sounded almost like a woman and a cat in a bag screaming together. Something super low to the ground that was crawling towards the cabin was shot before the man headed back inside. For the next 2 hours, the thing was screaming constantly and could be heard moving way out into the tree line. It never came back up to the cabin until everyone had fallen asleep. One of the people who was keeping watch had seen someone come out of the bathroom and lay down in the middle of the room and go to sleep. Something was wrong, and the thing would sometimes stand up and jitter or heave like it was laughing to itself. But nothing more happened that night. It didn't do anything else. Everyone woke up hours later, and the author noticed that his friend Tan was a little jittery. He seemed to be avoiding eye contact, and when everyone else was leaving, he stayed last in the cabin and told the author that he was making sure that he had locked up the cabin. He told everyone to start walking and that he would catch up. On the path, Tan came running up, and everyone started jogging back to his house, where they were going. There was a window in the bathroom of the cabin. They had forgotten to lock it. The window had been open the whole time. The monster had been doing it all along, waiting for everyone to fall asleep so it could get in among them. It walked with everyone back to his house, and then he said it lagged to the back of the group, before looking him dead in the eyes and walking into the woods. Number 4. Stone Chambers. Dotting western New England and eastern New York's forests are thousands of enigmatic buildings referred to as the Stone Chambers. Paid little attention to by mainstream academia, these omnipresent structures appear to have been a part of the landscape for at least as long as humans have lived in the region. Despite hand-wavings by local historians that they are all colonial root cellars, there has never been a shred of evidence to pinpoint who built them, when, or for what. No Native American tribes have ever claimed ownership, and no data exists to support any of the wild speculation alternative historical researchers often made about their origins. No artifacts, no markings, no signs of habitation, nothing but uniform construction and precision gives away their artificial nature. A small body of folklore and anecdotes has sprung up around these structures to fill the vacuum of verifiable information. In May of 1988, Frank Mullen and his son spent a weekend fishing and camping in Fenestog State Park, Dutchess County, New York. On the second evening of their trip, the two decided to set up their tent next to a chamber. When Mr. Mullen awoke the next morning, his son Terence was missing. He spent hours searching himself before he finally contacted local authorities. No sign of the boy was found in the surrounding area, and teams combing the entire length of the park found nothing. The only piece of evidence ever discovered baffled police. Inside the chamber were a set of prints belonging to Mr. Mullen's son. It appears as though the boy had taken 4 or 5 steps into the chamber sometime during the night, then stopped. What unsettled investigators was not just that no prints heading out of the chamber were ever found, but that a set of large, unidentifiable tracks were discovered starting from the back wall and meeting Terence's. One completely overlaid the boys' last step. The strange footprints were never positively identified, and no proper explanation was ever given for them. Terence Mullen is still missing. Many counties and municipalities have made it illegal to destroy or modify the chambers. These laws appear to have never passed for any historical preservation reasons. Most have been on the books for hundreds of years and often explain themselves as ensuring the safety of the local populace from outside harm. Many have reported severe vertigo and disorientation when spending extended periods of time inside a chamber. Some claim to feel eyes upon their back when facing away from an entrance. A legend originating near the Lake Champlain region, usually set in the 1920s, tells of a woman who used a stone cellar on her property to store canned goods. One summer morning she went out to get a jar of jam and found she could not exit the chamber once she had entered. Some invisible force blocked her way. She panicked and soon fainted. When she awoke, she found she could leave. Outside, snow covered the ground and her house was missing. The trees are said to have looked very wrong. When she wandered down a wooded trail where her street should have been, she saw dozens of stone chambers lining the path. From inside them came horrible gnashing sounds. Scared out of her wits, she ran back to the chamber she had awoken in and huddled inside until she passed out from exhaustion. She was found by her husband some interminable time later. She asked him how long she had been gone. He explained with both relief and confusion that no one had seen her in 2 years, and he had planned to tear down the cellar because it reminded him of her disappearance. No copies of the only serious text ever written about the chambers and analysis of the stone cellars of New England exist today. Only a few mentions in some historical quarterlies and a single quotation in a Massachusetts newspaper are all that's left. Written by an anonymous author in 1919, the book was apparently a dense academic piece describing a number of physical and mathematical properties expressed in the chambers' architecture, which related to ether physics. The final section of the tome postulated that the chambers acted as conduits for ether energy and could be tuned to view the outside. These would appear to be the reasons the book garnered negative attention from the academic world at the time, as Einsteinian physics was coming into vogue. The word returning is often associated with the chambers, though the origin of this connection has never been discovered. Despite the strange, ominous stories surrounding the stone chambers, those who have lived around them for generations seem to, For the most part, ignore them. When reminded of the Chambers' lore, the locals of the region will often dismiss the stories as superstitious nonsense. You will be hard-pressed, though, to find someone willing to spend a night alone in one. Number 3. The Seer of Possibilities. In life, otherworldly beings will sometimes find intriguing ways to contact people. In this one particular tale, a man by the name of Jack was contacted through his own computer. One day, seemingly out of nowhere, red text on a black background appeared saying, "Hi Jack, I need a favor from you. You're a very special person and I know you'll help me. I can't ask this of just anyone." Jack, unsurprisingly, had to do a double take, but the being contacting him seemed to be able to read his mind and know what his reactions would be. The favor in question seemed to be fairly mundane. Move a large potted plant a few inches from the wall at the place where Jack worked. That couldn't hurt, right? Jack did what he was asked to do. What happened next was something he could have never predicted. The day went on as normal, and nothing seemed to have changed at first. Jack did his usual job and spoke with his coworker Allie, who was the only person he really had connected with there. This morning, however, their conversation was cut short as their boss, James, hobbled out of the elevator complaining about a twisted ankle. Apparently, his foot had run right into the plant Jack had moved, which shocked him to no end. The morning after, James's foot was not getting any better, and Allie herself offered to take him to the hospital for a checkup. She said goodbye to Jack and went with James to go see his doctor. Minutes later, a loud crash was heard from outside. Allie and James had been hit by a large 18-wheeler, killing Allie immediately. Jack could not believe what had happened, and left work and went home, disgusted by what he had done at the request of the being on his computer. "No, Jack, it's not your fault," the computer told him. "I know you're blaming yourself, but all people die eventually, some just sooner than others." Jack had to resist throwing the monitor to the ground. "Jack, I'm going to tell you something, and I really need you to seriously consider everything I'm about to say. You thought you were in love with Allie. The truth is, you just wanted to fuck her. And please excuse my language, but every once in a great while it's best to be blunt. Jack, she wasn't the one for you. She would have made your life miserable. Yes, you would have eventually found the courage to ask her out. She actually was interested in you. She thought you'd make a good project. Sad, really, for her, not for you. I want you to think back to all the things she told you. Why did her last boyfriend break up with her?" Jack knew the answer. "Because she cheated on him, Jack. The same thing she would have done to you. She would have made you happy for about 2 months and then miserable for the next 4 years. Sneaking around, laughing at you behind your back, spending all your money. Once you finally got rid of her, you would have been so jaded that you would have never dated again. This is true, Jack. I see all future possibilities, the ones that come to pass and the ones that don't. You've seen how she really is, Jack, but you let your lust for her blind you to the truth. Together, you and I have made sure you avoided that path. One more thing, Jack. This isn't done playing out yet. There is more to come." You know what? I'm gonna have to stop the story there. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, but it'll be impossible to summarize this story in a reasonable amount of time without skipping so many good and important details. This story is crafted so spectacularly that if you were to read it for yourself, you would see just how wonderfully it's set up and paid off. Again, I'm really sorry, and please don't hate me for this. Trust me, you need to read this story for yourself. If you don't, you are missing out. There's so much there that I really just cannot gloss over in order to let you understand the full impact of everything. So please, read The Seer of Possibilities. Link is in the description. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2. My dead girlfriend keeps messaging me on Facebook. My girlfriend Emily died on August 7th of 2012. I just received another message, and it's worse than the others. She was involved in a 3-car crash driving home from work when someone ran a red light. She was dead within minutes at the scene. We had been dating for 5 years at that point. She wasn't big on the idea of marriage. It felt archaic, she said, gave her a weird vibe, but if she had been, I would have married her within 3 months of our relationship. She was vibrant, the kind of girl that would choose dare every time. She was always happy when camping, but a total technophile too. She always smelled like cinnamon. That being said, she wasn't perfect. She always said something along the lines of, "If I cark it first, don't just say good things about me. I've never liked that. If you don't pay me out, you're doing me a disservice. I've got so many flaws, and that's just another part of me." So, this is for M. The music she said she liked and the music she actually liked were very different. Her idea of affection was a side hug. She had really long toes like a chimpanzee. I know that's tangential, but I don't feel right without you having an idea of what she was like. M had been dead for approaching 13 months when she first messaged me. This is when it began. I had left Emily's Facebook account activated so I could send her the occasional message, post on her wall, or go through her pictures. It felt too final and too un-Emily to memorialize it. I share access with her mother, Susan, meaning her mother has her login and password and has spent a total of 3 minutes on the account, or total on any computer. After a little confusion, I thought it was her. I had received confirmation from Susan that she hadn't been on M's profile since the week of her death. M knew a lot of people, so I thought it was one of her tech-savvy friends fucking with me in the worst possible way. Around February 2014, Emily started tagging herself in my photos. I would get notifications for them, but they'd normally be removed by the time I got to the picture. The first time I actually caught one, it felt like someone had punched me right in the gut. She would tag herself in spaces where it was plausible for her to be, or where she'd usually hang out. I've got screenshots of 2 from April and June. These are the only ones I've been able to catch, so they're a little out of the timeline I'm trying to write out. Around this time I began to lose sleep. I was too angry to sleep. She would tag herself in random photos every couple of weeks. The friends who noticed it thought it was some fucked up bug. I found out recently that there have been friends who have noticed and didn't say anything about it. Some of them even removed me from their Facebook friends list. At this point you may be wondering, why didn't you just kill your Facebook profile? I almost wish I did. I did for a little while. On days when I can't get out there, it's nice to have friends to chat with. It's nice visiting M's page when the little green dot isn't next to her name. I was already socially reclusive when M was alive. Her death turned me into something pretty close to a hermit, and Facebook and MMOs were and are my only real social outlets. I sent what I assumed was M's hacker a message. On March 25th, I got an answer. It wasn't until a few months after going through these chats that I discovered that she was recycling my own words as well. My response seems kinda lackluster here. I was intentionally providing her or him with emotional bait. This is actually devastating. To keep them interested in their game, I was working off the assumption that the kind of person who would do this is the kind of person that thrives off of the distress of others. I was posting in tech forums, trying to find a way to find this person, contacting Facebook. I needed to keep them around to gather evidence. I had even changed the password and security details several times. I received this. I hadn't discovered any leads. Facebook had told me the locations her page had been accessed from, but since her death, they're all places I can account for. My house, my work, her mum's house, etc. My response here wasn't bait. "Yo, ask Nathan" was an inside joke that's too lame worth explaining, but seeing her say it again was absolutely fucking crippling. My reaction in real life was much less prettier. Her last few messages have started to scare me, but I wouldn't admit until this point. I don't even have words for this. Freezing is the first original word she's said. This is giving me nightmares that just won't end. I keep dreaming that she's in an ice-cold car, frozen blue and grey. I'm standing outside the car door in the warmth, screaming for her to come out. She doesn't even realize I'm there. Sometimes her legs are outside with me. I wasn't really drunk. Em wasn't an affectionate girl, and it always embarrassed her to exchange I love yous, cuddle, and talk about how much we meant to each other. She was more comfortable with it when I was drunk. I pretended to be drunk a lot. Her reply is what prompted me to finally memorialize her page, thinking it might put an end to this. It might seem innocuous to her previous message. It's from an old conversation where I was trying to convince her to let me drive her home from a friend's house. In the collision, the dashboard crushed her. She was severed in a diagonal line from her right hip to midway down her left thigh. One of her legs was found tucked under the back seat. Going back in time. These are the messages I sent her the day she died. She was usually home by 4:30. This, alongside a couple voicemails, is the last time I talked to her under the assumption that she was still alive. You'll see why I'm showing you these soon. I got these messages yesterday. I memorialized her page a few days after the message about walking. Until today, she'd been quiet. She hadn't even been tagging herself in my photos. I don't know what to do anymore. Do I kill her profile? What if it is her? I feel like I want to puke. I don't know what's happening. I just got notification. I heard the alert sound. I'm just too afraid to swap windows and check it. I checked the alert. I heard it as I was compiling all this together. This was the message. That's my door. That's my computer. I got the message 3 hours ago, but I didn't want to check it until now. Now I'm legitimately scared. I have no idea who took this photo. I'm on my tablet in my garage. Zen for now. Going to drive to friends. Forgot to open the garage door in my panic, so building up the nerve to go get out and do that now. Number 1. The disappearance of Ashley, Kansas. On August 16th, 1952, the small town of Ashley, Kansas ceased to exist. At 3 a.m. on August 17th, a massive earthquake that was felt throughout the entire state and most of the Midwest was determined to have had its epicenter directly under Ashley, Kansas. When law enforcement arrived to the scene, they were met with a smoldering, massive, and burning fissure, seemingly 1,000 yards in length and 500 yards wide. The depth never determined. After 12 days, the search for all 679 missing residents of the town was called off. On August 30th, another earthquake with the epicenter under what used to be the town happened, and the fissure in the earth closed forever. In the days leading up to the disappearance of the town, numerous strange and unexplainable events were reported from and around the town. One resident on August 8th reported a strange, small black opening in the sky, and moments later, the police station of Hayes was flooded with phone calls reporting the same phenomenon, a phenomenon not reported on by any neighboring communities. A trooper was sent in to investigate, but never reached the town. No matter where the man went, despite following the one road leading into Ashley, he became lost and never found the town, always finding himself back in Hayes. Police were sent in to investigate, but experienced the same results. All the while, more calls flooded the station and reporting that the black opening in the sky was gradually growing bigger in size. Soon, residents of the town began reporting missing children, and on the morning of August 10th, people called in to report that the town was in total darkness. The sun had never risen. At 10 o'clock, a helicopter flew over the region where the town stood, but the town was never observed from air. On August 11th, one caller reported that her daughter, Erica, had begun having conversations with her father, who had died 3 years prior. Erica was attempting to go outside, into the dark, to join them. Over the next few hours, 329 calls were placed into the station, all describing similar phenomenon regarding the children of the town. The next morning, all 217 children in the town disappeared. Callers were instructed to remain inside and avoid all attempts at finding the missing children. On August 13th, the residents reported a growing, distant fire to the south that seemed to turn the distant black into bright red and orange that seemed to extend high into the sky. It was steadily moving north and soon seemed to come out of the black sky. The last phone call received that day reported that the fire had grown so intense that it appeared as though it was daytime over the call.
Just hold on, wait. Yeah, I see something. It's to the south. It looks like...
The next and final phone call to ever be received out of the town of Ashley, Kansas, came the following evening on August 15th. The officer on duty was Officer Peter Welsh, and the caller has been identified as a resident of the town.
Hayes Police Department? Hello?
Yes, hello?
Ma'am, who am I speaking with?
My name is April Foster. Please, sir, help me.
What is happening, ma'am?
Last night they came back.
Ma'am, I'm going to need you to...
Last night they came back.
Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down and speak clearly. What happened? Who came back?
Everyone.
Everyone?
They all came in the fire.
What do you mean, everyone?
My son. I saw my son last night. He was walking down the street. He was burned. Jesus Christ. He was burned.
Ma'am,
He died last year. I raised him since he was a baby. It was just me and him. I told him to watch for cars when he rode his bike, but he never wanted to listen.
Ma'am, what you're saying isn't making any sense. You said everyone came back?
Are you fucking listening to me? Everyone came back. Everyone who died or went missing, they're back, and they're looking for us. He said, Mommy, I'm okay now. See, I can walk again. Where are you, Mommy? I want to see you.
Ma'am, where are you now? Are you safe?
I'm hiding just like everyone else. We saw them coming through the fields, and some people opened their doors for them. God, the screaming. I don't know what happened to them, but their houses caught fire and they caved in. I have my curtains drawn. I'm hiding in the closet right now, and...
Ma'am, is everything alright? Are you okay?
Oh my God.
Ma'am?
Something just came in.
Ma'am, stay as quiet as you can. Don't make a sound.
Mommy? He just came inside.
Stay absolutely still. Don't leave.
Mommy, where are you hiding?
Stay quiet.
Found you, Mama!
Ma'am?
The following morning, at 6:55 a.m., law enforcement arrived at the location of Ashley, Kansas. A smoldering, burning fissure in the earth was all that remained. And with that, this year's Halloween special comes to a close. I hope you enjoyed the 10 stories I found for this video, and I hope I was able to entertain you at least a little bit. Thanks for watching. Sleep tight, and good luck with the trick-or-treating. Stay awesome, everyone. Goodbye.